Looks like I'm live. Sorry about that, guys. If you're watching the replay, that's probably going to be a bit confusing, but I'm live and I didn't realize it. This shows how often I do this. So, looks like I can see the comments as they roll in. Yeah. Those of you that follow me on social media know that my back is messed up. And by messed up, I mean I was crawling around on the floor for multiple days straight. Um, Let me know how things are as far as audio and video. I don't go live often, so I don't know if it's still set up well for it, but little back update. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with my past with back issues, I've had multiple. I've had two back surgeries. The most recent one was 10 years ago. Both were discectomies, which mean that they go in and they chop out the part of the disc that is herniating out into the spinal column. And then they were both laminectomies as well, which means that they go in and they hollow out the inside of your vertebrae to make make more room for the area. So anyways, I had those 10 years ago. Back has been fine since for the most part. And then last Friday, just bam, back seized up. My had severe back pain for I still have back pain, but it was really severe for about 5 days. And now I'm entering the stage where I'm going to start getting the nerve pain. And the nerve pain, for those of you that have had back issues, is by far the worst part, because the thing about nerve pain is that there's no escape from it. There's no drug that can just take away your nerve pain. You just have to deal with it. And last time I was bedridden for a month and a half with that nerve pain. It was like so severe and there was no escape from it. It was real bad. It was a dark time in Nick Page's life. Like there was times where like I wasn't sure that I was going to make it through it. So that makes any kind of back injury now all the more scary, because I really, really don't want to have to go through that kind of pain again. So I've been doing everything that I can to not have to go through that again. And also, since I've gone through a couple of back episodes before, I kind of know what to do, what not to do. I can't sit yet. I probably could sit, but it would be the absolute worst thing for me. And yeah, it's so I've been using an inversion table a lot. I've been walking as much as I absolutely like my back will allow me to. So I've been walking a lot, and the rest of the time just laying down, mostly on the floor. So that's what my life has been. Yeah. The worst part of it all is that I am a self-employed workshop instructor, which means that I can't just call in sick, or I don't. If I don't go to work, I don't get paid. And I was supposed to have an Iceland workshop in a couple weeks, and I've had to find a replacement instructor for that, which is, as you can imagine, it's a huge part of my income, which is scary. And also, I have really terrible health insurance. So, like, it's not like I can just, like, on a whim go to the hospital, because all I'm going to do is rack up a bunch of debt. And that's not fun either. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to. How are you guys? I'm going to try to make my comments a little bit larger so I can actually read them here. This is live. I don't know that I'm going to keep this on up afterwards, because that was a pretty awkward intro. I know that there's a lot of people that have gone through this back injuries like this before. I mean, most of us in our lifetime are going to have a herniated or a bulged disc. Mine is between L4, L5, and what is it, L5 and S1? Is that right? Which means that, I have the typical sciatic pain in one leg, but in the other leg, it's kind of in the front and it's all numb and kind of makes me like the numbness goes down into my knee, which makes my knee kind of buckle when I walk a little bit. Yeah, how the hell did I ever get to be a scratch golfer with a bad back? Yeah, that's a good. Which came first, I wonder? Do I have back issues because I'm a golfer? Or do I just have a bad back because of, picking stuff up wrong? That's the thing I don't know. I know I won't be golfing for quite a long while, and it it sucks because this weekend is the club championship, and those that know me know that I'm an avid golfer. I'm right around scratch. I think I'm a .6. Before I was a photographer, I was a golf course greenskeeper, and so golf has always been a big passion of mine. And to miss the club championship's a pretty big deal because it's like the main tournament throughout the year that I actually care about. That sucks, but I won't be golfing. I plan on taking all fall, all winter off, and then we'll readdress things in the spring. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to ramble about was some of the criticisms and critiques that came in on my last videos. So the last video I posted was talking about how Photoshop doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be hard. And I tried to illustrate that by showing one of the most scary, techniques that people refer to as way over the top difficult, luminosity masks. I tried to show that those don't even have to be difficult. You can do it in a few clicks. One of the major criticisms that I got for that was that you're showing third-party plugins. Like, we can do that inside of Lightroom. Well, the thing is, you can't really do it well inside of Lightroom. You can kind of do it, but not really. It's like a super limited version of a luminosity mask, and is way more powerful in Photoshop. And you can do them without third-party plugins. It's just that so happens that third-party plugins make it way faster. It makes it a one-click thing. You can do them manually inside of Photoshop simply by going to your channels tab and selecting your alpha 1, and then you can restrict it from there. But I wanted to demonstrate that it can be done quickly, and I didn't really want to go down the rabbit hole of explaining how to create luminosity masks. Anyways, tons of comments came in about how, Lightroom can get you most of the way there. Lightroom is good enough. And the main thing that I want to convey is that good enough and complacent, things like that are the enemy of progress, the enemy of getting better. The person that gets better is the person that is never really content. You think about an athlete, athletes when they're getting to be their best, they're never happy. They're never content with how their current state. They always want to be better, faster, stronger. And the minute that they start thinking, I'm good enough, that's the minute that they stop getting better. And the same is true for us as creative people. The minute that we turn our back on an entire 50% of our creative process, which would be post-processing, when you're like, my post-processing, good enough. That pretty much means that you're never going to get any better at post-processing. In fact, that's probably about when you start to get complacent and you get worse at post-processing. And post-processing is 50% of a creative workflow. It's 50% of the creative process. Part of what made Ansel Adams was the fact that, yes, he went out and he waited for the perfect moment and for the light to be, what he was looking for to illustrate that scene. But then he went back and he spent months, working on the post-processing for that image. He spent a lot of time trying to perfect his darkroom post-processing. And without that darkroom post-processing, Ansel Adams would not have been Ansel Adams. If it's someone turning their back on, getting better at post-processing would be the equivalent of Ansel Adams sending his film off to Walgreens and calling it a day. That you wouldn't have ever heard of Ansel Adams had he not developed his own film. And all of us have that same, creative side of the post-processing part of things available to us, and we can learn it for free. We can learn it quickly. There's nothing holding us back other than our own complacency or laziness. And just because you can over edit things by, trying to employ every single technique and every single tool doesn't mean you have to. And I think that that's one of the biggest criticisms to learning Photoshop, is that people use the term that looks photoshopped, meaning that looks fake as hell. And it's taken on like this negative connotation when it doesn't have to be. Just because something is processed in Photoshop doesn't mean that it has to be garish and cartoony. It just means that they were using a more powerful tool. Now, how they choose to use that tool, that's the important thing. Taste is the hardest thing to teach. It's also the hardest thing to learn. So that's something that has to be developed. But you're still better off to learn all the tools and techniques available out there. That way you can choose to use them however you see fit. With great power comes great responsibility, right? And so it's the same as true in post-processing. Just because you can do stuff doesn't mean you need to do stuff. It doesn't mean you should do stuff. And half the time you have to figure out, okay, which of my techniques am I going to use? And which techniques am I going to just like save for later? There's a lot of Lightroom only users out there right now that I feel like, because small scenes are becoming more and more popular right now, there's kind of this movement for small scenes and vignettes of nature and abstracts and things like that. There's that kind of whole movement moving away from dramatic, epic landscape photography. I think that is kind of fueling some of this less is more post-processing movement as well. Because in that type of photography, you don't really need a lot of post-processing. It's more about the composition and the scene and what you chose to photograph. But there's a lot of types of photography that, you cannot get it right in camera. And I get so tired of hearing that. Most of those people that say, I get it right in camera, are graduated filter users. Don't get me started on graduated filters. They're a terrible, destructive workflow unless you have like a one-stop ND filter that you're using, graduated, or you have a perfectly flat horizon line. And a lot of us never shoot those kinds of scenes. And there isn't a such thing as a one-stop graduated ND. That, and they don't shoot scenes that require any kind of focus stack, because if you focus stack, you can't do that in camera. And I know there's some cameras that can like do the automate the shooting process of that, but that doesn't put it all together into one frame. And then there's some cameras that will put it all together in one frame, but it's giving you a JPEG, not a RAW file. And so to me, that still doesn't count as getting it right in camera. And then there's also other scenes, like a waterfall scene, where you have one specific shutter speed in mind that looks good in the water. But when you get to that shutter speed, you start having blurry foliage everywhere. Like all the limbs and leaves are blowing around in the vortex from coming off the waterfall. And as a result, you end up with blurry foliage, but the right motion blur in the water. And the best fix for that is to do two different images, one with a fast shutter speed for the foliage, one with a slow shutter speed for everything else. Can't do that in camera, can't do that in Lightroom. And once you can do that stuff in Lightroom, maybe I'll change my tune, but I doubt it, because Photoshop is still the most powerful program, and people are better off to learn it. If you're going to spend time learning something, it might as well be the best thing rather than the almost best thing. Because in my opinion, if you're going to spend time on something and you only have so much time to spend, why not spend it in the area where you have the most headroom to grow? Otherwise, you're going to reach the apex of what you can do, and then you're going to be like, oh, now I have to learn a totally new program. Or you could have just spent all that time you spent learning this program on this program, and you'd still be growing. And to me, growing is absolutely the most fun part of photography or any other endeavor, because as you grow, that's where the joy comes from. Getting to the destination is often a letdown compared to the actual growth, in my opinion. So I have rambled for a long time. I should probably look at some comments and stuff. Instagram changed photography for the worse. Totally agree. For the longest time, when you're looking at a picture this big, it has to be garish and dramatic and epic and oversaturated. It has to be all of those things. Subtle doesn't convey well in an image this big, you know? So totally agree. Instagram changed photography, but hopefully we're all moving away from Instagram anyway. I think post-processing is just as important in small scenes. I also agree. I think that post-processing is just different in small scenes because you employ different techniques. Things like dodging and burning and contrast are important in any scene. And the more you take control over that stuff and the more you take control over where highlights live, the better, the more in control you are over the visual flow. So yeah, am I still using a Wacom tablet? Yes. So I'll show you this here. This is the newer Wacom Intuos Medium. And essentially it's exactly the same as the one that I had before this one, only it's got a little smaller footprint on my desk. It's a little thinner and a little less extra space, but it still has the same size drawing area, and I really, really like it. If you have not used a Wacom tablet, it's kind of a game changer because we spend so much time developing our muscle dexterity, when writing throughout our lives, that when we go to grab a mouse, it's a completely different thing. And we have so much more dexterity and fine motor control with a pen or a pencil than we do a big, bulky mouse, that when you go to do things like dodge and burn, it makes a huge difference. I love my Wacom tablet. Hello from India. Hello. Saw a gallery show in Santa Fe with about 5 or 6 different versions of Moonrise that Ansel Adams did. Amazing to see different interpretations. Do I start in Lightroom, then go to Photoshop, or do I completely process in Photoshop? I do all of my importing and cataloging and organization inside of Lightroom. And any types of photography that are not like a single edit, right? So I used to be an everything photographer where I did lots of portraiture and sports and weddings and live music, all that kind of thing, all those other genres. And Lightroom was the right tool for that stuff because it's really good at batch editing. But for single one-off edits of a landscape where I go and I do a full shoot for a sunset and I come away with one image, and that one image I want to be perfect, that's when I edit in Photoshop. So my workflow always starts in Lightroom, and then I might do a couple tweaks, and then I'll open it up as a smart object inside of Photoshop, so I still have access to all that raw data. And then I do everything else from there inside of Photoshop. No matter how much more I can accomplish in Lightroom, it's never done until I use Photoshop to complete the job. Absolutely, because one of the many things that Photoshop is better at is sharpening. So when you go to sharpen for the web, there's so much more flexibility about what you're sharpening, how you're sharpening, where you're sharpening, how much you're sharpening, what type of sharpening. And in Lightroom, you have a slider. And people get addicted to sliders because they're simple. All you got to learn is that slider. It goes left, it goes right. You learn what you like and you use that for everything. The problem is when you have options, then you have to learn those options. And a lot of people just don't like the time investment. And I understand that not everybody has the time to invest in stuff like that. Some people only have have the weekend to even think about photography. But there's a lot of people that spend their every evening, watching hours of television or playing hours and hours of video games. And you don't ever really get anything back other than some burnt hours and entertainment when you're spending your time that way. But if you take that same chunk of time and invest it in learning something, that knowledge stays with you. And that's like an investment. It's an investment of time. And if you invest your time into something that actually makes you better at something, that's investing in yourself. And so for those people, those are really the people that I try to inspire and talk to, because I just find that people they just burn away huge chunks of their lives. And most of the time it's just doing stupid crap that we never get anything back for. Playing video games, watching television, those are things that it's just wasted time in the long run. When you look back at your life, you're never going to be like, I'm sure glad that I watched that last season of Game of Thrones. But at the end of your life, had you spent all of those hours learning a new trade or tool or something, and you could totally do it in that amount of time, if you invest that time, it could be a life changer. It was a life changer for me. I didn't pick up photography till I was like 30 something. Well, how old was I? Like 32, 33. And it was a complete life changer for me. I'm so glad that I took the time to learn photography, because it changed my life. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about this whole concept of never getting complacent, never feeling like things are good enough. Because as soon as you start feeling like that, you're not growing and grow anymore. But the cool part about a creative endeavor like photography is you don't have to be smart. You don't have to be tall, fast. You don't have to be athletic. You don't have to be anything other than just willing to put in the time to learn it. Anybody can learn it. And most of it you can learn for free on the internet. So why in the hell would you not do it? Especially if you claim to be passionate about it. Why are you getting complacent about something that you're passionate about? You must not be very damn passionate, and I know that there's like a lot of people that it's just a hobby for them, and I totally understand that. But for the people that take it really serious and take the time to like leave nasty comments on a video, like those are the people that I'm talking to. Like, if you're so passionate about this, why don't you spend some time learning something, Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little harsh, but I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the super chat. What's my process for analyzing a picture for post-processing? Yeah, that's a great one. So like a lot of times when I photograph a scene, I already have an idea of what I'm going to need to do to it, mostly because there's issues. Like as soon as you take an image, there's issues right off the bat. Sometimes it's that it's low contrast. Like if you're shooting from a vista at a very distant landscape, that's going to be very low contrast because you're shooting through atmosphere. Sometimes it's a really high contrast scene. You got a really bright sky, really dark foreground. So the first thing I usually think about is like, okay, I need to fix the dynamic range of this scene. I need to darken the sky, lift the shadows. That way it mimics what we see with our own eyes, because as you guys know, when we're out looking at a sunset scene, we look into the shadows, we see everything. We look into the sky, we see everything. It's because our eyes have kind of auto exposure, right? And so even though a camera can capture the dynamic range as it was, the dynamic range as our camera sees it is not reality for us. Reality for us is being able to look in the shadows, see everything I want to see, look in the sky, see everything I want to see, because we have auto exposure going on with our pupils. So for that reason, my goal is always to get it back to how I experienced it. Now, how I experienced it is not how my camera experienced it. My camera is just a stupid little black box with some electronics in it. The way I experienced it was I looked down and I saw certain things, but my eyes skipped over other things. So I try to draw attention to the things that I enjoyed and I noticed, and I try to downplay the things that my eyes skipped over. And so the entire post-processing process is me trying to get back to how I experienced the scene. What are my thoughts on using devices like triggers to capture lightning? So hold on one second. So this is what he's talking about. This is a lightning trigger. This is the lightning trigger 4, I believe. And I have had very, very limited success with lightning triggers. I find that the only kind of lightning they really work with is staccato lightning, where you get multiple strikes and it's kind of long lasting. But the type of lightning that I'm often photographing is not that. It's not usually the cool one. So I find that I miss a lot of bolts, or I miss half the bolts with these, but they're great for daytime lighting where you can't really get your shutter speed very long to begin with. But when it's fairly dark, like a twilight scene or just a nighttime scene, I prefer just doing a time lapse. The reason for that is because I feel like I miss fewer, especially if I can make the interval between frames very short and lengthen my shutter speed enough to where it's like I'm shooting like 0.8 seconds with a 1 second interval. That's only a 20% chance of missing something. And the other reason is because, like, even if I don't like the bolts that I captured, I still come away with a cool time lapse because storms are cool in a time lapse. So yeah. Let me see. My wife wishes she would have watched more TV. Since discovering photography at the start of the pandemic, I've been obsessed with getting better at photography. And honestly, like that's my favorite stage of anything, is like you discover something. Like it could be you discover knitting, right? And then like, okay, I really like this knitting thing. And then you start to like research it, and then you start to learn new things about it, and then you start to implement those new things. And that whole process is the fun part of anything. And, you know, it's journey before destination. The journey, the ride is the fun part, not where you're going. Like where you're going is often just like, it's not only a letdown, but it's kind of sad because like I've ran out of crap to learn, you know, and that's depressing. But it's that whole stage of like learning and working at something and being driven, like all of that is the fun part. I have so many great tutorials for sale on my website. Which order would I start from to learn Photoshop? So the order that I would recommend would probably be Essential Photoshop for landscape photography first. That's like Photoshop 101 for landscape photographers. It's designed for people just coming out of Lightroom. And then the next one would probably be Mastering, Dodging, and Burning, and then Mastering Luminosity Masks. And then the very last one would be Advanced Concepts for landscape photography. So yeah, thank you, ZJ. I'm probably going to have to call this short because I'm starting to get some pretty bad nerve pain and I shouldn't stand here for too long. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for this little bit, letting me ramble. Remember, if you're interested in picking up any tutorials, it's a great way to support me right now because it's kind of the only way to support me. All my tutorials are on sale for 30% off, and you can use the offer code BADBACK22, no spaces, and that'll get you 30% off. Derek, how's it going, Derek? Is it possible to have too long of a shutter speed for lightning outside of overexposing? No, not really. Like it's a balance. It's kind of like flash photography. So like the longer your shutter speed is, the more ambient light you're letting in. So you want that lightning to be impactful to the scene. So you don't want too much ambient light. So it's a fine balance. So like as it gets really dark outside, I do 30-second exposures as long as you're not getting multiple lightning strikes in that time. All right. Thank you guys so much. I gotta go. Nerve pain is hurting right now. So it's time to go get on the inversion table. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.